this is not the real Sam. This is just a picture. But Sam was a student in a rural high school here in Manitoba. This was a high school that I began working with in 2010, and they were far outside of the city, so I used to drive out and spend a week there working with the staff and then come back. And this time that I drove out, we used to have sort of PD on the Monday morning so we could talk about what did we want to work on, and then I'd stay for the week and we'd work on things. And so on the Monday I said to them, so, you know, how's it going? And they said, you know what, Jen, it's going well. We've got a lot of things up and running. We've done the RD program. We've got some, you know, we've got class meetings going. We've got a number of different pieces going. We're figuring out the differentiation piece. But we're struggling with what to do with kids with significant disabilities. How do you put a kid with a significant disability into grade 11 chemistry or whatever it is, right? And I said, okay, fair enough. Let's take a focus on that. How do we meaningfully include, not just have them breathe the same air, right? But meaningfully include the kids in high school classrooms who have significant cognitive disabilities. So I asked them, what course, of all the courses your high school offers, what course would be the most difficult for you to do that? And the answer was grade 12 PreCal, for obvious reasons, right? And I said, okay, so let's play with this, right? Let's play with the PreCal and see what we can do. It was a small high school, so there was only one teacher that taught that course. So I said to him, what is your course about? What are the concepts that underlie your course? And he started to name some of the algorithms, right? Well, it's trig, it's logarithms, it's right, this. And I said, okay, I understand that your students need to know how to do that. But let's back it up to the conceptual level first. What are the concepts of your course? And he kind of stopped and thought about it for a moment, and then he said, well, it's really about functions and relations. And I said, okay, can you, I mean, I know those words in lay terms, but just clarify for me, in math, what do you mean by function and relation? And he said, well, it's about the relationship between two variables, right? You've got x and you've got y. When you change x, does something happen to y? And if so, what? And is it linear? Is it curvilinear? Is there no relationship? What's the relationship between these variables, right? I said, okay, that makes sense to me. I can understand that this is about relations and about functions in the sense of, is y a function of x, and if so, in what way, right? So I said, okay, now, we know what the course is about. Who uses it? Where is it used? Where is PreCal used, right? So he said, well, engineers use it, and I said, okay. He said, architects use it a little bit. I said, okay. And surveyors use it. So I said, if we said to the kids that we're going to put you into groups and you're going to represent a construction company tendering a bid, and you need to tender a bid to us to build an extension to the school. And so you're going to have to go out into the yard and survey the yard to see, well, what land do we have available to build this extension? And then you're going to have to come inside and create a blueprint of, so here's what we're suggesting, and we would tell them some criteria, like we need 4 more classrooms, and we need 2 bathrooms, and we need whatever. And then build a mini model, like what architects build, of here's what it would look like, right? And create a budget and present it to us, saying you should hire our company because here's what we're proposing to build. In doing that, in going from the 3D of the yard to the 2D of a blueprint, back to the 3D but to a different scale in the mini model, would they have to use the algorithms that are in your course? Would they have to use sine and cosine and tangent and logarithm and all of that kind of stuff? And he looked at it and he said, well, we have to put the criteria in a certain way. And he said, and they wouldn't use every single one of them, but they'd use a lot of them, yes. We'll kind of teach these little mini lessons and then have the kids work with the material. So now we take Sam. Now this is retrofitting, by the way, except that I already had Sam in mind as I was thinking about that, so it wasn't really. But to demonstrate it to him that we could meet the needs of his other students and Sam, right? Sam was a student in the school with Down syndrome. He was 17 years old. He had not been in an inclusive classroom since grade 4. So he'd been in separate programs and LAC classes and working with an EA in the little room and so on since grade 4. Sam was considered to have oppositional behaviors. He wasn't violent in the sense of like randomly attacking you. But he would cross his arms and refuse to do things. He'd flop on the floor and refuse to get up. And if you tried to reach in, then he would be aggressive. He would kick you away or push you away or hit you or whatever. Okay? So I asked them about Sam's goals. They had, on his IEP, they had 3 goals for Sam. One was Sam will follow instructions. In other words, Sam will stop being oppositional, right? 2 was a communications goal around Sam developing. Sam spoke in a 2 to 3 word kind of pieces, but he didn't speak a lot. And they were trying to elaborate so that he could make choices and communicate socially, etc. And then the 3rd goal was a fine motor goal, because Sam, like many kids with Down syndrome, had a hard time with fine motor skills. So that's fine, we took those 3 goals, and then I said, this is a math class, what about Sam's math? And they all kind of looked around, and I said, well, can he count? And they said, well, to 20, and then it gets kind of random. And I said, okay, there's a lot of measurement in this unit. Can he measure? Does he know how to use a ruler? And they said, well, he uses a ruler as a straight edge, but I'm not sure he would know how to start at 0 and go to a specific distance. And I said, okay, so in addition to his 3 IEP goals, let's add 2 math goals. 1, Sam will learn the numbers to 30. If he knows them to 20, let's get them to 30 because that's what's on a ruler. And 2, Sam will learn to use a ruler to measure specific distances, right? Because that's a basic measurement skill. So now we're going to take Sam and we're going to put him into the PreCal class. And I said to the teacher, what I need you to do, the only adaptation we're going to make, if you want to call it that, is I need you to choose a few kids that have really good social skills to be in Sam's group. Because this is his first time in the class in a long time. It's the kids' first time having him there. We need to have some kids with some good leadership. They don't have to be your best mathematicians. They just have to have some good leadership skills for the first time that Sam is in the classroom. He said, yeah, no problem. So he selected a few kids. And we went in and we introduced the project to the kids. And I'm going to, for the first week of it, be there co-teaching, but I won't be there. He'll have to carry this forward. And so we introduced it to the kids. Now the kids had done the RD program. They had the language of multiple intelligences and so on. And so we said to them, so now go around the table of your groups and decide who's going to do what. Because somebody has to hold the poles, and somebody has to sketch the angles, and somebody has to do the measurements, and then somebody's going to have to draw the blueprint, and so, you know, you've got jobs to do. Decide who's best to do what, based on your strengths and skills as a construction team. And then I sat down with Sam and his group, and we did exactly the same thing. We went around the table and said, so who's good at what? Who could do what? So for the surveying, the kids decided there's these poles, and one pole has to stay stationary, and the other one has to move, right? So that they can take the different angles as it moves. So they decided that Sam wasn't great at standing still, so they would have Sam hold the pole that moved, right? And which was great, because that was going to involve following instructions, because they would yell to him, okay, Sam, move 6 steps to the left, Sam, move 5 steps to the right, whatever. And so one of the other students would be with him, and they would do the measurements. Then when they came in to do the blueprint, I asked them I said, the one favor I have to ask of you guys is I want Sam to actually draw the blueprint. So you guys do the calculations of what needs, but then I want you to tell Sam to draw a line that's 11 centimeters, draw a line that's 6 centimeters, right? And I said to them, Sam hasn't used a ruler in a while, so you might need to remind him to start at the 0. That's all I said to them, right? And then when it comes to building the model, he can be cutting and gluing and all that stuff with you guys, because that's the fine motor, right? So he's going to be following instructions. He's going to be communicating with his peers. He's going to be working on his fine motor skills. He's also going to be working with the ruler and trying to learn those numbers and how to use a ruler. His presence in that project doesn't take away from the learning of anybody else. They're doing what all the other groups are doing, right? We haven't changed the project just because Sam's part of their group in any way. When they're surveying, Sam is surveying. When they're doing blueprints, Sam is doing blueprints. When they're building the model, Sam is building the model. This is what we call same task, different goal. So he's involved in the same task as them, with them at the table. His goals are different. right? Is he getting a credit for PreCal? No, okay? He's learning his numbers to 30. That's okay. But he's there with his peers. And that has huge impact on his communication, on his learning. It also, we have to recognize that what we do in our schools ends up filtering out into the community. That when Sam's the weird guy in that little room down the hall, in the town that he lives in, that isolates him and his family. But when Sam's their friend, the guy they hang out with, and when Sam after school gets a job in the local grocery store or in the local whatever and they walk in, it'll be, hey Sam, right? Not, what's he doing here? So what we're doing just by having him in that classroom has a massive effect on his life after school and on the other kids, because they learn that there's nothing to be afraid of with Sam, right? So what we see with Sam is, not only does Sam learn and the other kids learn, they get a chance to learn some leadership skills and other skills as well. We find out things we would not find out and be able to work on in the little room with an EA. Like, Sam will follow instructions if she's pretty. Okay? The kids figured out very quickly that if it was boys telling him what to do, he wouldn't do it. But if Sarah asked him to do something, no problem. He would do it. And then Sarah comes to me one day and she says, Miss Katz, I don't want to get Sam in trouble, but I thought you should know, Sam tends to say what Sam is thinking. And I said, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Sarah? And she said, well, so here's the story. And if you work in high schools, you can picture, or even middle years, you can picture this. So Sam is sitting at the table doing the blueprint. The kids have figured out that Sarah's the one that he'll listen to, right? So she's standing behind him and just kind of like a teacher saying, okay, Sam, put the ruler down, right? So he's sitting in the chair and looking up at her, right? So he looks up at her and says, you have really nice, okay? So I said to Sarah, okay, are you uncomfortable? She said, oh no, he's just saying what all the guys are thinking. I said, yes, and you would tell the other guys to shut up. So you need to tell Sam to shut up, because don't treat him any differently. He needs to know that he can't say things like that. She said, oh, the guys already did. I said, what? She said, oh yeah, when he said it, one of the guys whacked him on the arm and said, Sam, you can't say that to her. You have to tell us. Okay? Which to me was like, hallelujah. Because what does that tell me? It tells me the guys are treating him like one of the guys. And they're teaching him that you can say to another guy, wow, she's hot, right? But you can't say it to the woman in the checkout line, which is going to be really important for Sam's future, right? So the power of his presence, we would not have learned that. Sorry, I'm almost 50, so I can say this. We would not have learned that in the little room with a 50-year-old woman, because guess what? Sam wasn't making those kinds of comments, right? Okay? You know, right? We only learned, and Sam only learns how to interact with his peers if he gets a chance to interact with his peers, right? He can't learn those things in a little room. That's not going to happen. So the purpose of this kind of design of problem-based learning is that A, all the kids find PreCal far more engaging doing a project like this than doing an example on the board and then being handed the textbook and saying, turn to page 24. So all the kids benefit, right? Everybody benefits. And it creates, because those kinds of hands-on projects automatically have steps in them that are easier and steps in them that are more complex, you're going to be able to multi-level them relatively easily. You can't multi-level turn to page 24 and do the odd numbers. There's no way to multi-level that other than to give a different book to the kid. But a hands-on project like that is easy to multi-level, right? The flip side of that is when I asked the teacher at the end of the semester, I sent him an email and I said, how did the kids do on the exams? Because of course that was his big fear, was would they be ready for the exams? And he said, well, they did really well, but this was a really strong class, so I don't know if it's because of the project, which is fair enough, right? It's not research-based to do something once and say, right? He said, fair enough. I'm glad at least it didn't negatively impact them. Let me know in the coming years, right, how this goes. So a year later, he sent me an email. He said, this year's class, it was a little more normal with the scores. He said, but they did well. They did as well as they would have had I taught in the typical way, if not better. And he said, but there was a different outcome that had nothing to do with the exams. And I said, oh, what's that? And he said, I have kids stopping me in the hall and saying, I didn't take PreCal 11, but can I take PreCal 12? So word has gotten around, right, that this is a cool class and that this is a cool teacher. And construction is a big industry in that town, so the idea of getting to build and draft a model and you do blueprints and everything else is interesting to those kids. And so now you've got kids who previously would have said, I'm not taking that class, right? No way am I taking PreCal, saying I want to take PreCal. So not only have we served Sam in terms of being able to include him, but we've served a lot of other kids who would not otherwise have taken that course. And now we'll have PreCal, should they ever want to, go take something post-sec that requires that credit.